the first point I want to make is that you need to make a study plan. This is made assuming you have 6 weeks before your trials. But even if you only have 4 weeks, which it sounds like a lot of you do, you have 4 weeks, or some have 5, some might still have 6. Basically, the way you want to think about making a study plan is to work backwards. Okay, that's the first key point. You want to work backwards. So you want to map out what you want to be doing each week before the trials. So let's say your exams are August 1st. What do you want to be doing 1 week before those exams? Well, all I would want to be doing is practicing adaptation, as in practicing question adaptation, doing new questions for my essays, looking at new craft of writing questions, and just practicing adapting your core responses. I would already want to have memorized my responses to the extent that I am going to memorize them. Some people don't like memorizing the full responses, the full core drafts. Personally, I used to do that. I would still recommend doing that. But regardless of how much you've memorized, once you've memorized everything you want to, in that week before trials, I want to make sure I'm at a stage where I know all of my responses. And then all I have to do is look at a lot of new questions and write lots of different responses to those questions, but I'm adapting my drafts while I'm doing that. So you definitely don't have to have more than one core draft for your essays. We'll talk about that, but one core draft for all of your essays. And then you want to be practicing adapting to as many different types of questions as possible. Now, the main thing I would be doing the week before your trials, again, I'm working backwards because that's how you have to think about it. A week out, I would want to be doing introductions and topic sentences mainly. So I wouldn't want to necessarily write full essays every time I look at a different question. So an absolutely key tip here that I would write down is that you want to be focusing on doing lots of introductions, again, adapting your core draft introduction and adapting your topic sentences. I would be focusing on those disproportionately. The reason for that is, as I said, is to be efficient. You want to focus on the things that matter most. And if you're writing out full essays every time, that's not very efficient. That's going to take a lot of time, and that's going to take away time from studying for other important things. So I would occasionally write out full essays and practice adapting your evidence and how you explain your evidence to different essay questions. But the main thing that I would be doing is looking at different question types for your essays and craft of writing as well, and practicing your introductions and topic sentences for the essay. And then you can practice, for instance, your first paragraph of your craft of writing, practice some part in the middle and some part at the end. So you don't necessarily have to keep writing out the full response, the full composition, that is. So it's important to focus on the things that matter most. And you all have to know that the introduction and topic sentences are the most important parts of your essay, because that's where the marker is basically going to decide what band you fall into. So if you have a great essay, apart from your introduction, because you have left your introduction to write on the day because you thought that that's the way you do it. Oh, I don't know the question, so therefore I'm not going to draft an introduction and memorize it. You're in big trouble, because if that doesn't sound sophisticated and have flair, the market, that's the first thing the marker reads. So therefore, whether it's the right thing or not, there's going to be a certain level of bias there. And the marker's already mentally going to group you into a band after reading your introduction. So that means you definitely need to prepare a really nice, well-polished core introduction for all of your essays. And you also need to do a lot of practice at adapting those. But you'll find that the more you practice adapting introductions to different types of questions, the easier it will be to maintain those core pieces that you originally had in the draft, because you'll become more in tune with the parts of the sentences that need to be adapted. And you know where you can preserve your original piece. So that just takes practice. That's what I'm focusing on in that week before. I'm obviously going to do some section 1 practice as well in that week. Comprehension, the section 1 of the common mod, that reading task, that's what I mean by comp skills there. I want to be chipping away at that for a few weeks leading up to the exam. And I probably am just doing that in small doses throughout. So I just want to keep sharp. I want to be constantly practicing different types of questions and just getting really fast at writing those responses. Okay, so you want to be able to identify techniques really quickly. And you also want to be able to write a response really quickly, because section 1 of paper 1 is the trickiest section in terms of timing. Really hard to do it in that 45 minutes. even though you're going to use the 10 minutes reading time on top of that, it's still hard to do that in the 45. So you really need to be sharp with that. I would be chipping away at that for a few weeks before the exams. Okay. Don't leave that to the last week. The first thing is I would be looking at past HSC questions. Sometimes they don't show the section 1 text because they're kind of protected by copyright laws. So you'll see a note about copyright, but a lot of them do show the text, or they at least say what the text is, and you can then go search it up and do the questions. The other one is online. There are various past papers available. You'll be able to find some sources. I'll even send through an email later. I have a link to a lot of trial papers that schools have used. So you want to get access to trial past papers and HSE past papers and just be practicing those. So again, you can just go to the NESA website for the HSC past papers, and you can even search up the texts that are protected by copyright. You can just go search them up yourself, or you can Google online, find some past trial papers and use those. But again, I'll make a link available that takes you to some past English trial exams. Yeah, so that approach is great. And if you're noticing that talking about the challenges of human experiences is a nice broad question that helps you adapt to any other possible question, and you have to actually go and look at other questions and think, what's the hardest possible question they could ask me here? And if you find that you're still able to adapt, then that's a great practice question. And I think to your point, if I'm talking specifically about challenges, I think that's a nice key term to focus on, because that will obviously be central to any text. There's going to be a complexity explored with respect to the human experience, no matter what. And every question is going to tie into some kind of problem, some kind of challenge. So challenges is a nice term. Glad you brought it up. I think if the question was, is that a good approach? I think, yeah, that's a great approach. Have a generic essay, but still have an essay question. People prepare drafts without an essay question. That's not good, because you want to at least have the base essay addressing one question so that you have a very deliberate response still. You don't want to have some kind of fluffy generic thing that you think will just adapt to anything. You still want to have structure and an argument throughout. So I actually think you're better off having a broad question. It can be broad. Use that for a draft, and then make sure that the draft response actually answers that question. So try not to be too generic, and try to avoid not having an essay question to use for your core draft.